Hi, I'm Debra Stengel, founder of Sedona Soul Adventures, on my podcast, Soul Sync, the alchemy of life and love, where I give you the secrets, the alchemy, the magic of how you can have the life and relationship of your dreams. Grief is such a strange thing, right? It's like just when you think you've got it handled, suddenly you feel this huge wave wash over you that just takes your breath away. So that's the first thing I want you to know. Grief isn't something you handle. It's a process that comes at you in waves. So the best thing is to learn how to surf those waves. I lost my mother to cancer over 40 years ago. She was only 51 and I was just in my 20s. And it's still the worst thing that has ever happened to me. And way back then, I didn't have any help with my grief. I was so young and stupid and I had no idea how to handle it. And all these years later, when she comes into my mind, I still have this incredible combination of emotions. Even after all these years, I can still get this huge wave of grief and sadness over all the things that have happened in my life that I haven't been able to share with her or talk with her about. The number of times I wished I had her just to talk to, or especially to get advice from her. So, the first thing to understand about grief is that grief is not just one emotion. It's the combination of so many different emotions: anger, depression, guilt, sorrow, rage. You've got to first give yourself permission to feel all those ugly feelings. And the thing is, they're not ugly feelings. They're just really intense. But the most important thing is you've got to let yourself feel all that. Otherwise, the energy gets stopped, and that's when all the trouble starts. When you shove down the emotions, especially something like grief, you're just asking for trouble because it's going to come back up in some other way and it's going to bite you in the butt. Grief and all these other intense emotions are energy. The more you can allow these emotions to flow through you, the faster they're going to move through you. But the big problem is that our society tells us to man up, don't fall apart. After my mother died, I spent the next 2 weeks just crying. I would go to law school during the day, and every night my boyfriend would come over, and he would hold me, and I would cry. But after 2 weeks of that, he suddenly said to me, "Okay, it's time for you to get over this." Like, okay, time's up. You've had 2 weeks, time to get over it. So I was like, wow, okay, I am truly on my own with this. And this is one of the things that we see so often with people who come here to Sedona Soul Adventures to heal their grief. They just don't have anyone in their life who can really help them, because most people, your friends, people you work with, even other members of your family, usually just feel so uncomfortable being around other people's emotions. But again, feeling those emotions and allowing them to move through is just so important, because ironically, the more you shove down the grief, the longer you're going to stay in that first stage of the grief that is so overwhelming and debilitating, where you sometimes feel like you simply can't even function. So I know it's not rational to be angry over someone dying, but it's completely rational to be angry with someone for leaving you, because that's what you're really angry about. Angry with God, angry with them for leaving, angry with yourself. So you've got to give yourself permission to feel whatever that grief is and whatever it's about. I mean, like pets, a relationship ending, whatever it is that you're feeling grief about. Because there's also this other really weird thing out there about, in our society where it says, okay, it's only okay to grieve for the appropriate things, like a spouse passing or a child dying, someone dying from an illness before their time. But other situations somehow don't qualify or aren't important enough for you to grieve. We've had so many people come to us after the loss of a beloved pet. And one of the reasons they were having such a hard time is because everyone around them thought it was like stupid for them to feel that level of grief for an animal. But I can tell you, when I've lost my beloved four-leggeds, I'm grieving. I'm a mess. They're with me every day. They're this huge source of unconditional love. The grief is there and it is very real. So the next thing, don't allow others to judge whether or not your grief is okay or not. If you're feeling it, you're feeling it. And kind of strangely, one of the things that has helped me with healing my grief, and that we've used so many times with people who have come to us over the years, is identifying exactly what is the emotion I'm feeling. It's grief, yes, but am I feeling angry, depressed, guilty, anxious, sad, or something else? Or could it be that you're lashing out at the unfairness of it? I mean, that's how I felt about my mother. In a weird way, it's interesting to see all the different gradations of how I'm feeling. It's like, wow, look at all these different emotions that are overtaking me. If you can take just a moment to step back and look at that, it starts to shift. Now, especially at the beginning of your grief, that's almost impossible to do. But as you move along the journey of your grief, it can be almost kind of fascinating, because that's what this is. It's a journey. 20 years after my mother's death, I came to Sedona for the first time in 1999, and I discovered that I still had so much grief locked in my body. I was in my 20s when it happened. I didn't know how to handle it. I shoved it down, and it was coming out sideways and affecting my other relationships, affecting my work, and, really every part of my life, because that's how it works. One of the practitioners that I worked with gave me this fantastic tool that we use now all the time and that I want to pass on to you. When you're feeling all these emotions, when you feel really overwhelmed, actually make them bigger, really big, so that the energy moves through you faster. We've already said that you want that emotional energy to move through you as quickly as possible. So when you start feeling the emotion, make it even bigger, make it huge, feel it even more. If you're angry, get more angry, and maybe even scream into a pillow. Or my personal favorite, I hit a wiffle bat on the bed. Every time I do that, the energy moves so fast, it almost just exhausts me. If you're depressed, make yourself feel even more depressed or even more sad. Think of all the memories that make you even more sad. Make yourself cry harder. It's amazing how that energy will move when you do that. It's been so interesting over the years that ever since I started Sedona Soul Adventures over 20 years ago, from the very beginning, we've had so many people come to us to heal their grief, especially in situations where a spouse or partner had died, or the one that I know is so devastating, which is the loss of a child. And one of the things that I discovered many years ago, that I have had many past lives where I lost children. So it feels to me that I have sort of a soul contract to work with that. And one of the things that I was shown by my guides many years ago in doing all this work with people is that when someone dies, it's as though there is this full pot of tears that needs to be shed for them. If you're trying to heal your grief, your job is to empty that pot as soon and as fast as you can. Now, this may sound a little weird, I get it, but I'll tell you, I've helped myself and so many other people with this idea and with doing this. Whenever I was working with someone trying to heal their grief, I would literally be shown the pot and its size. And they're always ceramic. And it's so interesting. Most, but not all of them, are a kind of terracotta color. And the amount of tears is based on how tall the pot is or how wide it is. But the point is, you've got to empty the pot. So the way to do this is when you cry, cry harder, cry longer, real big tears that are full of the love that you had and that you have for that person. Because think of it, your grief is a testament. It's an honoring to how much you loved and still love that person, how much they meant to you, how much you were able to allow another person into your heart and soul. Now, it might be mixed in with guilt and shame and anger and sadness and all of that, but I mean it. Those tears are you honoring them and your love for them. When those tears come, feel all the emotions. Get mad at God. They can take it. Make it bigger. Feel it even more. Let that energy move through you. And my prayer for you is that you'll find, like I did, that time really is a healer, that you can eventually come to a place, now maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but sometime where you suddenly realize, wow, this time that wave of grief didn't knock me over. It came through, I felt it, and it moved on. And then you might even have some sweet memories of that person you loved so much. And, even though my mother's death, it's still the most devastating thing that's ever happened to me. But looking back over all these years, the crazy thing is there were huge gifts that happened because of her death. First of all, it started me on my spiritual path. I started using my grief to try to discover things like what happens after we die. I read the book Life After Life by Dr. Raymond Moody about near-death experiences. And that book changed my life and really started me on the path that eventually, years later, led me to founding Sedona Soul Adventures and doing my life's work. The other thing that happened is that my very stoic German family finally started saying, I love you to each other. And we had never done that until then. And it opened the way to me finally having a deep and loving relationship with my father. After my mother's death, I had a lot of anger and judgment of my father because of the way he had treated my mother. But I was finally able to move through that. And many years later, to be with him at his passing. And when I was there with him, at one point, he woke up, he turned and he looked at me and he said to me, I couldn't love you any more than I do. And that helped me so much to move through my grief. So my mother's passing has been such a huge piece of my life. And in many ways, it's been an incredible gift. And of course, if someone had come up to me at her funeral and said something like, oh, this is all happening for a reason, and someday you will see the gift, I would have smacked them. I certainly wasn't in a place to see that then, but I see it now, and it means everything to me. So if you're in a place where you're experiencing this kind of overwhelming grief, remember what I've talked about here. Give yourself permission to really feel it. When it comes, don't shove it down. Make it bigger and bigger. Let that energy just move through you. When you're crying, cry big and empty that pot of tears. And remember, your grief is you honoring that other person and your love for them. And, if you're finding that you're having a lot of trouble really moving through the grief, think about doing a retreat with us, either here in Sedona or even online. We've been helping people with their grief for over 20 years. Gosh, we had a couple here a while ago who had lost their daughter. She was just in her 20s, and they were, as you can imagine, they were just inconsolable. But the big thing that had happened was not only were they grieving her, they were lashing out at each other. They were angry with each other, and they both came to us saying, this doesn't make any sense. On top of our grief over our daughter, we're hurting each other and destroying our relationship. And it took us a while to untangle what was going on with them, because a lot of it didn't even have to do with their daughter's death. It had to do with their own core wounds and fears about their own death. And we worked through it, and they said they felt as though a huge cloud had been lifted. I spoke with them a few months later, and they were feeling so much lighter, feeling so connected with each other again. And it was so beautiful. Give us a call. We can help. We can help you with that wave of grief that just feels so overwhelming. And I still miss my mother so much. I still wish I could call her up and talk to her, but I feel her love. I know a part of her is with me, and that means everything. So thanks for being with me. I'll see you next time.